Every year in the United States, people go missing. Most of these cases are eventually explained. Sometimes it's someone running away, sometimes just a need to disappear, and most are later found. But there are cases that aren't talked about as much. Some of them involve long-haul truck drivers, people who, in theory, are extremely difficult to lose. Their locations are tracked, their hours are logged, and their routes are constantly monitored, which makes their disappearance almost impossible. And yet, some cases don't follow that pattern. Everything appears normal until a driver suddenly stops. Not at a scheduled stop, not because of a breakdown. They just stop. And later, the truck is found with no indication of where the driver went. Now, let's take a look at 5 of these cases. Case 1. The driver who called dispatch and then vanished. The last recorded communication from this driver was a routine check-in call to his dispatch center. Calm, on schedule, no indication of any problem. And 40 minutes later, his truck was found parked on the I-40 shoulder in eastern New Mexico, with the engine running, the door unlocked, and no sign of where he had gone. Interstate 40 through eastern New Mexico crosses the high plains of the Llano Estacado, a flat, elevated plateau with long, unobstructed sightlines, minimal population, and stretches of highway where the nearest town can be 30 or 40 miles in either direction. It is a well-maintained, heavily traveled freight corridor connecting Albuquerque to the Texas border. And it is a route this particular driver had worked for nearly 8 years. The driver was a 47-year-old owner-operator running a refrigerated freight load destined for Amarillo. He had checked in with dispatch at the standard interval, reported his location as approximately 12 miles west of the New Mexico-Texas border, and confirmed his estimated arrival time. The call lasted under 2 minutes and contained nothing unusual. It was the last communication anyone received from him. When he failed to arrive at the Amarillo terminal, dispatch attempted contact multiple times over a 90-minute window before notifying state police. New Mexico State Police located the truck parked on the right shoulder of I-40 within the hour. The engine was running. The cab was unlocked. The driver's personal belongings, wallet, phone, logbook, a half-finished thermos of coffee, were all present. The refrigerated load was intact. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, no indication of a medical emergency. The driver was simply absent. What makes this case unusual is the phone. His personal cell phone was found on the passenger seat, not dropped, not broken, placed there. The screen showed no outgoing calls after the dispatch check-in, no texts, no searches, no activity of any kind in the 40-minute window between the call and the truck being found. Either the driver set his phone down and walked away from a running truck on an open highway for reasons that have never been established, or the phone was placed there after he was no longer able to place it himself. A ground search of the surrounding terrain was conducted over 2 days and produced nothing. The Llano Estacado provides essentially no concealment. Flat, open ground with sparse vegetation. If the driver had walked in any direction, he should have been visible for a considerable distance. No one saw him. No vehicle stopped near the truck in the 40-minute window was identified in witness accounts from passing traffic, though traffic on that stretch of highway was light. Reports like this appear in the documented record of I-40 disappearances with a frequency that is difficult to attribute to chance. A second owner-operator working the same corridor went missing under comparable circumstances 3 years later. Truck found running, personal items present, no indication of departure. That case also remains open. Neither investigation produced a cross-reference between the 2 incidents. The refrigerated load is the detail that investigators noted specifically. The cargo required temperature-controlled transit and was time-sensitive. An owner-operator abandoning a refrigerated load mid-route faces significant financial and contractual consequences. The driver had worked this lane for 8 years without a single documented incident of this kind. Nothing in his employment record, his personal history, or the details of his final call suggested a reason to stop. The dispatch recording was reviewed multiple times. The call is unremarkable in every respect, until it ends. What's difficult to explain isn't where the driver went. It's how he could have left at all on an open highway from a running truck in the middle of a shift. Under those conditions, it shouldn't have been possible. Case 2. The truck found at the bottom of the grade. A semi-truck was found at the base of a steep grade in US 50 in central Nevada, with no skid marks on the road above it, no evidence of brake failure, and no driver. And the cargo manifest showed the load had been secured and checked at a weigh station less than 2 hours before the truck left the road. US 50 across Nevada is sometimes called the loneliest road in America, a designation that is not marketing but an accurate description of the geography. The highway crosses several mountain ranges through remote passes with stretches of 50 or more miles between services. The section in question descends a significant grade through the Toyabe Range in Lander County, a route that experienced drivers treat with specific caution due to the combination of elevation change, curved geometry, and limited shoulder width. The truck was inspected and cleared at a weigh station east of the grade. The inspection log noted no deficiencies. The driver, a 52-year-old with a clean commercial license and no recent violations, had signed the clearance and departed approximately 90 minutes later. A passing motorist reported a truck off the road at the base of the grade. Nevada Highway Police responded to find the truck on its side against the embankment. The cab damaged but not destroyed. The cab empty. The absence of skid marks was the first anomaly documented in the crash investigation. A loaded semi-truck descending that grade without braking would generate skid evidence detectable over a significant distance. The road surface above the departure point was examined and showed no such evidence. The truck's brake system was inspected after recovery and found to be functional. The working hypothesis that the driver lost control and was ejected was challenged by the absence of any ejection evidence in or around the cab, and by the seatbelt which was found fastened. A seatbelt fastened with an absent driver means one of two things. The driver was removed from the vehicle after the crash, or the driver was not in the vehicle when it went off the road. Neither explanation is straightforward. The crash reconstruction team noted the anomaly in their report and offered no resolution for the anomaly. The driver was never located. An extensive search of the terrain around the crash site, complicated by the steep and rocky nature of the grade, produced nothing. No remains were recovered in subsequent months. The case was eventually classified as a missing person presumed dead, a classification that requires neither a body nor a cause of death, only the passage of time and the absence of any evidence of continued life. The crash site itself offered one additional detail that the investigation did not fully address. The truck's departure point, the location where it left the road, was on a section of the grade where the shoulder widens slightly before a curve. Drivers familiar with that route described the widening as a natural point to reduce speed or pull over briefly if needed. Whether the truck left the road from a stationary or near stationary position, rather than at highway speed, was not definitively established. The absence of skid marks is consistent with both scenarios. The investigation defaulted to a high-speed departure, which is standard for this type of incident. The stationary departure possibility was noted, but not pursued. When the vehicle was inspected, the seatbelt was still fastened, but the driver was gone. The braking system was fully functional, yet there were no signs of skid marks. Under those conditions, how does a driver just disappear? The crash investigation was closed.
The missing person file remained open in name only, with no clear explanation. Case 3. The driver whose route ended at a closed road. When investigators retraced this driver's last known route, they found that the final GPS coordinates placed him on a section of US 93 in southern Idaho that had been closed to commercial traffic for 11 days, meaning either the GPS data was wrong, the road closure records were wrong, or the driver had passed through a closure that should have been impassable. US 93 in southern Idaho runs through the Snake River Plain and into the high desert terrain approaching the Nevada border. It is a route used by agricultural freight operators moving between southern Idaho and northern Nevada, and it passes through several small communities that serve as informal waypoints for drivers on long overnight runs. The closure in question had been posted for emergency infrastructure work on a bridge crossing, a standard closure with detour signage and a barricade at both ends of the affected section. The driver, a 38-year-old owner-operator who ran the Idaho-Nevada corridor regularly, was reported missing after failing to deliver a load of agricultural equipment to a receiver near Jackpot, Nevada. His dispatch records showed his last check-in approximately 4 hours before his expected delivery window. The GPS data from his truck's onboard unit was pulled during the investigation and showed his route proceeding normally until the final data point, which placed him on the closed section of US 93 at a timestamp consistent with his expected travel time. The closed section was checked by investigators. The barricade at the northern end of the closure was intact. The barricade at the southern end was also intact. There were no tire tracks on the road surface within the closure that matched the profile of a loaded semi-truck. The GPS coordinate, if accurate, placed the driver on a road he could not have been on without disturbing barriers that showed no signs of disturbance. What makes this case unusual is the specificity of the GPS data. Onboard truck GPS units log position at regular intervals and are not easily manipulated without access to the unit itself. The data was pulled directly from the hardware by investigators and showed no signs of tampering. Either the unit malfunctioned and produced a false final coordinate, a type of error that is documented but uncommon, or the truck was genuinely at that location. Both possibilities raise questions that the investigation did not resolve. The driver's truck was eventually located in a turnout approximately 18 miles south of the closure, engine off, keys in the ignition, the load intact. The driver was not present. No evidence was found connecting the truck's final location to the GPS coordinate from the closed section. The gap between those 2 points, 18 miles of road between where the data said he was and where his truck was found, has not been accounted for in any available record. The detour route around the closure added approximately 22 miles to the standard drive. If the driver had taken the detour, his GPS data would have reflected the deviation. It would have shown him turning off US 93 and rejoining it south of the closure, a path that would be clearly visible in the position log. The data showed no such deviation. The route recorded was straight, continuous, and placed him inside a section of road that the physical evidence says he could not have been on. These two facts, the GPS record and the physical state of the barriers, cannot both be correct. The investigation did not determine which one was wrong. It was recorded in the investigation file as a possible equipment malfunction, but the real questions remained unanswered. How the truck could have left a restricted area, or whether it was ever truly there, was never investigated further, and that situation was never fully clarified. Case 5. The truck that completed the route without its driver. The onboard GPS data for this truck showed it completing its full intended route through central Wyoming and arriving within 2 miles of the delivery terminal, a journey of over 4 hours, despite the driver having been confirmed absent from the vehicle at a point near the beginning of that route, with no second driver on the manifest and no record of anyone operating the truck. US 287 runs north through Wyoming from the Colorado border, crossing the Wind River foothills and the high plains of Fremont and Natrona counties before connecting with I.
It is a route used primarily for energy sector freight equipment for the oil and gas operations that dominate the Wyoming economy, and it passes through terrain that is remote even by Wyoming standards. Small communities along the route are separated by distances that make roadside assistance a significant undertaking in poor weather. The driver, a 41-year-old employed by an energy services carrier, was documented at a fuel stop in Rawlins at the start of his shift. Security footage confirmed his presence at the fuel counter, his departure from the lot, and his truck pulling northbound onto US 287. Approximately 40 minutes into the route, a rancher near the highway reported seeing a man walking southbound on the highway shoulder, a description that matched the driver in clothing and approximate age. The rancher did not stop, noting that the man did not appear to be in distress and was walking with apparent purpose. The truck continued north. The GPS data showed it maintaining highway speed through the remainder of the route, making no unscheduled stops, and coming to rest in a pullout approximately 2 miles south of the delivery terminal, where it was found the following morning by a terminal employee who had noticed it was overdue. The driver was not present. The engine was off. The load was intact. What makes this case unusual is the GPS continuity. If the driver left the truck 40 minutes into the route, as the rancher's account suggests, then the truck traveled over 200 miles of Wyoming highway, including grades, curves, and at least one uncontrolled intersection without a driver, without incident, and without deviation from the intended route. This is not consistent with an unoccupied vehicle. A truck with no driver does not navigate a 4-hour route and park itself 2 miles from a delivery terminal. The GPS data was examined by the carrier's technical team and by Wyoming Highway Patrol. No evidence of tampering was found. The data was assessed as accurate. The investigation's working hypothesis was that a second unidentified individual had been present in the truck, a passenger not on the manifest who had driven the vehicle after the driver's departure. This hypothesis was noted as unverified, and no evidence supporting it was ever produced. The driver was found 11 days later, alive, at a bus station in Casper, approximately 70 miles from where the rancher had seen him walking. He had no memory of the 11-day period. A medical evaluation found no neurological explanation for the memory gap. He was unable to account for how he had reached Casper, what he had done during the intervening period, or most notably, why he had left the truck. He reported no distress, no external pressure, and no reason for his departure. He simply could not remember making the decision to leave. The rancher's account adds a detail that the investigation treated as secondary, but that is worth examining more carefully. The driver was described as walking southbound away from his route with apparent purpose, not stumbling, not distressed, walking as if he knew where he was going. 11 days later, he was found 70 miles north of where the rancher saw him walking. If he walked south from the departure point, how did he end up north? The geography does not support a southbound walk leading to a Casper bus station either. Either the rancher's directional observation was incorrect, or the driver's movement during those 11 days did not follow the expected path. The investigation did not reconcile these details. According to the latest information, the driver physically recovered and was able to return to work after some time, but the real questions remained unanswered. Who was driving the truck for those 4 hours in central Wyoming? The final note added to the file was the possibility of an unidentified passenger, and after that, no further information was recorded. Professional drivers are among the most monitored civilians in the United States. They operate under federal hours of service requirements that mandate logbook entries at specific intervals. Their vehicles are equipped with GPS units that record position continuously. Their routes are known to dispatch before departure. Their check-ins are scheduled, and their loads are documented from origin to destination. When a professional driver disappears, there is more data available than for almost any other category of missing person. What makes the 5 cases covered here worth examining together is precisely that data and what it fails to explain. The I-40 driver vanished from an open flat highway between a confirmed check-in call and a truck found running 40 minutes later. The US 50 driver disappeared from a crashed vehicle with a fastened seatbelt and no skid marks. The US 93 driver's GPS placed him on a road that was physically closed. The I-70 driver was seen with specific unreleased details confirmed at a location that showed no record of his presence. The US 287 driver's truck completed a 4-hour route after he had apparently left it. In each case, the data that should have provided answers instead created new questions. The GPS data conflicted with physical evidence. The witness accounts contained details that should not have been accessible. The vehicle behavior did not correspond to the absence of its operator. The investigations in each case reached the point where the available evidence produced an inconsistency that standard explanations could not resolve. And at that point, each investigation effectively stopped. This is the pattern that connects them. Not a shared location, not a shared demographic, not a shared route. It is the shared structure of the investigation outcome, documented thoroughly up to a specific point and then encountering something the documentation cannot contain. The file continues. New entries stop. The case stays open because it was never formally closed, but it also stopped moving forward at the moment the evidence became irreconcilable. There is one additional element worth noting: the absence of cross-referencing. None of the 5 investigations produced a reference to any of the others. They were handled by different agencies in different states across different years. The I-40 and US 50 cases share a geographic region, but were filed independently. The I-70 and US 287 cases both involve drivers on active routes with recent confirmed check-ins, but no investigator appears to have searched for comparable incidents before closing each file. The pattern visible when these cases are placed side by side was not visible or not sought when each case was handled in isolation. 5 drivers, 5 routes, 5 investigations that documented the question clearly and produced no answer. The routes are still active. Drivers still work them. Whether the conditions that produced these cases are still present on those roads is not something any available record addresses. Cases involving missing drivers and official records are often very different from the stories told among the public, because in these cases there is no lack of data. GPS logs, dispatch records, fuel transactions, logbook entries, everything is thoroughly documented. And yet, the cases covered here, despite all that data, left behind unanswered questions. These drivers were not inexperienced. They were not in unfamiliar areas. They were on known routes doing their routine work when they disappeared. And that's exactly what sets these cases apart. Not the absence of information, but the presence of conflicting information. Only one of the 5 drivers was ever found. The other 4 were never seen again. The driver who was found had no memory of what happened, and how many similar cases never reached the public remains unknown.